Hey everybody, Derek here to bring you another video for The Walking Dead countdown to the start of Season 6. And what I'm going to be doing today is a little bit of a prelude to my video about Carl and Enid, and I'm going to be discussing a very important question that's a very big issue in the comic, which is, will Carl lose an eye in Season 6? I think this is very important, and I think that it will potentially lead into my discussion with my next video. So I wanted to do this video first. Just in case you guys are not caught up with The Walking Dead Season 5 or the comics, there will definitely be spoilers in this video. So if you do not want to be spoiled, please do not watch the video because you will be spoiled. Okay, so obviously a very big issue with the comics, for Carl. Something that he, has to deal with ever since the 14th volume. And in the 14th volume, a big, huge herd of walkers just breaks down the walls of Alexandria and, basically come in and start, killing some of the people and, taking over the area. And during this time period, Douglas, the leader of the community, commits suicide after losing his wife, after realizing that he was no longer a fit leader. I think he really, lost his way and couldn't get past those facts. So he goes outside because he tries to shoot himself and he just can't bring himself to do it. So he goes outside in order to get bitten by walkers, so that way he can't really, opt out. So as the walkers are biting him, he's firing off shots randomly, and one of them hits Carl in the eye and basically just takes a huge chunk right out of his right eye and the right side of his face. Carl does survive, but it becomes a very big wound. It's very gross to look at, unfortunately. Even from a comic book standpoint, if you take a look at the injury, it really is not pretty. And I wish that was something that many of us could look past. Some of us can and some of us can't. And some of us, it just takes us a while to do that. But unfortunately, when we see, things like deformities or, various situations that happen to people, some of us, have a lot of a problem looking at that. And sometimes it makes us sick. Sometimes it makes us very fearful. A lot of different things can go through people's minds. And it's sad. And Carl has to face those realities now in the comics, because of the fact that he lost his eye. He pretty much has this big hole in his head. He can't see. He grows hair over it, and then he wears glasses over it. But nonetheless, people will either know what's behind there or they've seen it. And of course, sometimes, unfortunately, when you see those things, you can't block them. It's a sad thing. And Carl basically feels like, a freak, unfortunately, walking around with that injury. And, we see that, when eventually the Savior storyline comes along and he goes and he fights, helps to fight against the Saviors with Rick's community, Negan brings up that fact. He makes Carl take off, the glasses or remove his hair. I think he just had hair at this point over it. But he makes him move aside his hair and look at the wound and go, "Oh yeah," and he makes fun of it. And it's a very traumatic experience for Carl. Definitely something that is very heartbreaking, very hard to watch from a perspective of a reader. And I think about this as we go into the TV show. Will it happen to Carl? And I'm finding that more and more since the comics have become, more about Carl. Rick is still involved, but I find that the last several volumes have really been oriented towards Carl. He's really been a big factor in what has happened in the story. And I'll get to that in a second. But I feel like there are a lot of differences between Carl in the TV show and Carl in the comics. Quite frankly, I feel like Carl in the TV show right now is less vicious than Carl in the comics. I feel like, Carl did have his dark time period, and obviously, he was still suffering from when he had to, shoot Lori after Lori died. And, with all the things going on with the governor and his stance of wanting to help, feeling like he had to take on a burden and also just, really, accepting this darker side, accepting this killer within him, things like that, he ended up shooting one of the kids in Alexander, or not, excuse me, in Woodbury, Jody, one of the people that was in the governor's army. And I think that that was the darkest that we saw Carl get. But once we see him, get acclimated into the prison community, and once, he is on his own in the episode after and realizes that he's not yet ready to face these challenges without Rick, I think it really opens up his mind. But I think that a lot of his experiences and a lot of the people that he's been around have really helped form him into more of an, a good person, somebody who has a hopeful outlook at the world and wants to see great things happen and wants Rick's group to do good things. We saw that particularly, excuse me, we saw that particularly whenever whenever Gabriel was in trouble. Gabriel was out on the rock. They hear the screaming. Who's the first person who wants to help? Carl. And I think that really speaks to how he's feeling. And you see, him with, Gabriel. He wanted to save him. And we also just see whenever he talked to Rick, that he believed that their group was strong, and because of the fact that they were strong, that they could still help people. And this is something that Carl embraces and something that he wants to do. And it's something that really hasn't changed. Now, Carl didn't really have as much of a central role in season 5. It was more focused on Rick, Daryl, some of the other characters, as they were dealing with various circumstances. A lot of the first half dealt with Beth at Grady Memorial. And I think that right now we're getting into this time period where I think that Carl's going to become more important, particularly because they are introducing this potential new relationship, friendship, whatever it may be with Enid. And I think that this is something that they will explore in the TV show. Absolutely. I don't think it was just a coincidence those two in the episode try. But I feel like one of the things that is going to come in The Walking Dead is a darker time period. And that is something that is inevitable. When we have the walkers invading Alexandria, which I think is most likely going to happen, when we have, the wolves coming to the walls, and when we have the saviors coming, I think all those storylines are going to happen. I would be very surprised if something terrible didn't happen from any of those. And they're not going to skip the saviors. Let's just face it. You can't do that. You know how many comic book fans you would upset? I mean, too many. You have to do the saviors storyline. Something terrible has to happen with the wolves. And I think in order to keep the show exciting, in order to keep that tense, adrenaline rush that you usually get when you watch it, I think walkers are going to have to invade the walls because that's a big, story from the comics. And when all of these happen, I really feel like that is going to start to change Carl a little bit. And I think that it is really what started to change him in the comics. After dealing with his eye being shot out, after seeing, people die, he saw Glenn get killed. After seeing that scene, after being humiliated by Negan, after the whole Savior's War, things like that, I really think that it hardened Carl and formed him into the person that he's become. And, part of me wonders if a lot of that does have to do with the fact that he is somewhat deformed, by losing his eye. You see in a lot of different media, when it comes to villains, some villains are deformed, and that is part of their hatred. It's part of what makes them upset, angry, and unfortunately motivated to do bad things. The Joker, definitely, that was a big part of him, his scars. The Penguin looking the way that he did. I mean, you look at various different things, and because of this deformity, because of something that happened, it makes them upset. And it unfortunately makes them act out in a villain-like complex. And it partly makes me wonder if Carl may, be driven by that. And I think that he is. Because one of the things that you see in the comics, again, this is still spoiler warning for anybody, but once the Savior War is over and things are, starting to get back to normal, Carl does start to get older, but we just recently finished issue, I think it was 142, something like that. And I read it, and what happened was, before that, Carl and some of the other people at the Hilltop community ran into these people called the Whisperers. And the Whisperers are individuals who have decided to live with the Walkers, live amongst them. They basically take Walker skin and, cover their faces and bodies with it, wear dirty clothing to kind of mask them. It basically makes them smell like walkers so they can live with them. And they have this philosophy of living with walkers. Well, one of them was named Lydia, and she ends up getting captured by Paul Jesus Monroe and taken back to the Hilltop. What ends up happening is Carl gets close with Lydia, and Lydia, basically grows a connection with Carl. And she actually does see his wound. Carl takes off his glasses and shows her the wound, and she ends up, in a way, embracing that, making it sound like it's a part of him. It's something that, she admires, maybe even likes, because she does actually lick it. Yeah, I don't want to be too crude, but that's what she does. And what happens here is, Carl actually really enjoys Lydia's company, and he explains it later to Rick, because what ends up happening is Carl and Lydia actually have relations. They do have an encounter. And as a result of that, after that happened, the Whisperers came and took Lydia back. Carl went after them. And of course, they found out about it. Now, Rick eventually is able to make a connection with the Whisperers, because he finds out that Carl went missing, and they go to find him. And Rick ends up having a confrontation with Carl. And Carl basically tells him in this most recent issue, Dad, the only person that ever looked at me in a normal way since I've lost my eye is Lydia. And it's something that he loves. It's something good in the world. And that's what he sees it as. He sees Lydia as something great. He sees, like, in a way, his own salvation. Something that, he can confide in, something that he can enjoy, somebody that he can grow a connection with, who won't judge him for that outward appearance. And I think that we all look for that if we do have some kind of an unfortunate deformity. Looking for that one person who can look past that. And that can be hard. And I pray for people that have those kind of problems. I can only imagine what it's like, and it must be unfortunate. And I can understand Carl feeling that way, because he basically says, even though I have these glasses on, even though I've grown my hair over it, but nonetheless, when you still see my wound, even you, Dad, you cringe. You make faces. You don't see me for who I am. You just remember this wound on my face. And it upsets him. And it kind of motivates him to grow closer to Lydia. And I think that is a very big factor for him. And, we've seen Carl act out since, everything has happened. One of the things that happens in the comics is that these two boys try to beat up Sophia, maybe even do worse to her. And Carl ends up taking a shovel and beating the boys to a pulp. Almost kills them, but he doesn't. And of course, in a way, he was starting to act in self-defense, in defense of Sophia, but eventually it became this enraged beating. And that's the thing. Even in the law's perspective, we look at times where somebody does something like this, and there's a difference between defense and absolutely, pulverizing a person. And that can change, depending on what you do, depending on what happens, those circumstances can change. And it definitely did in this situation. So, I feel like because of everything that's happened, I really think that is something that's going to happen to him. Whether it's going to happen in season 6 or later, I don't know. But I really feel that if they're going to take on the story to the Whisperers, if they're going to make the show run longer than that, which I hope they do. I don't want them to stop at just the Saviors War. I think there's a lot coming in this Whisperers storyline, and I think it's very interesting. And I hope they do pursue it. But if they do, I feel like one of the only ways that they can really get Carl to grow close to people like this, to basically, become accepting to Lydia, and in a way, kind of turning from his father a little bit, is by, allowing him to have that deformity happen, or something else happening to him, but something that changes his outlook. Because right now, I feel like Carl is really a very good hope for the future. And I think that no matter what he will be, he goes back and forth at times, but I think that we really need to move into that kind of a territory. And I think that after everything has happened, I think that losing his eye is almost something that has to happen. I'll be very interested to see if they do it, but I really think that it's necessary at this point, because the comics have taken it so far and have really made it a big part of Carl. It's not something to be ignored. It's not something that he ignores, and it's not something that other people ignore. So I think it's a very essential element. How will that impact him and Enid? That's something I'm gonna, dig into in my next video. Because now that I thought about that, and now that that most recent issue of the comics came out, I really think it was something to observe before I made a video about Carl and Enid. So with that, I'm going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. If you guys have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if there are any suggestions that you guys would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and thank you very much for watching.